I'm doing this thing right now. I'm opening up some of those things that I was looking at today, right? Those bills. And, I was on the train and I was coming back. And when I was on the train, one of the things I realized? That this impeachment has absolutely no legal justification. There's actually no real legitimate reason for trying to impeach Donald Trump on spurious charges that he's solely responsible for what happened at the Capitol. But what there is another chance to undo what was done via an appropriate timeline, by the way, concerning their failure last year to impeach him. When information that they expropriated and illegally determined to be classified or under investigation and kept within a select group, at least what was publicly represented, a select group of people that were engaged in the impeachment proceedings. They took all these reports, all of this personal information about people they were trying to extort into cooperation with them in their crimes, and they took it off the grid. They took it out of the public realm. And in the meantime, they stole our lives. They stole our electronic accounts. They stole information about who we were. And a lot of that is also connected to the turnover related to the Affordable Care Act. See, as I've said before, if you're dealing with patient records, they're only required to keep certain patient records for 7 years, maybe 10. Well, even if you had a 10-year, even if there was a 10-year requirement to keep patient records, we're already 6 months, we're already 9 months past due. And they intentionally did this. And they intentionally launched this biological warfare because everything's prioritized under COVID. So if you were just starting to get the word, or you were starting to get a little self-confidence, especially after they declassified information last summer, well, the term of 10 years on your original reports, that's already expired. And they've already sold those patient records. They've anonymized them and sold them to someone else. And now we're supposed to accept that all the other disturbance going on in our life and all of the reprogramming and re-engineering is about COVID-19. And it's not. And so this false sham impeachment threat that they're doing right now is an attempt to cover up for what got uncovered up after they had to declassify certain information at the end of last summer that was allegedly used as part of the impeachment proceeding. And now they're trying to reclassify it. And not only are they trying to reclassify it, but now they're again, if we've done anything as a recovery on our own, if we've been able to live through their toxic dumps in electronic warfare against us in the last year, then they're trying to classify that again. And so even if we were able to do something while we were alone in our houses and while they were setting up all of these completely fraudulent, unconstitutional, unconscionable scams, well, then they've classified it again. I told you, keep your mouth shut, put your mask on, vote for Joe and vote for Kamala. And if you don't, well, then we're just going to do it again. So this isn't even about impeaching Trump. This is about punishing all of us that actually paid attention to what happened in the last year. It was declassified just long enough for us, especially me, and you'll see this in my videos, for me to say, wait a second. So while they had all of this stuff classified, I couldn't get information about this. I couldn't get information about this. I remember this information from 2008. I remember this information from 2010. Why wasn't this available in the last few years? You mean because you were illegally investigating me after I requested Congress investigate crimes connected to the Secretary of State? You see, that's why absolutely nothing that's trying to go through a laundering fest through the Department of State has any validity. The Department of State never had jurisdiction. The Department of State never had jurisdiction in 2009. And they still don't have jurisdiction. How many bills I got here? 15. Remember I was talking this morning about 15 bills. And the ironic thing is, in my notes from last year, I have one that says firefighters under the DOD is about Area 51. I have another video on here where I talk about, or I have another public notice where I found a Department of the Army memo. It was dated for almost a year ago concerning employment at Area 51. What kind of people do you think find employment at Area 51? You don't think there are people that prior to the onset of COVID-19 or prior to the announcement of COVID-19 might have thought that they had, I don't know, specific kinds of entitlements or security classifications. Just so you know, that memo was not under the Department of State. Why are they releasing information about things connected to Area 51 right around the time they're discussing how we have to change everything about our lives and livelihoods and allow for the entire government and the entire society to be centralized under the government in preference of paying for the livelihoods of certain people that are allowed to have jobs while the rest of us aren't? Let me review. Okay, first I'm looking at, and I'm going in the inverse order of what they were put in the list. H.R. 2794, Defense Small Business Advancement Act of 2019, sponsored by Representative Xochitl Torres Small, introduced on May 16, 2019. Nice, right? May 16th, 2019 is the anniversary of postings on Senator Feinstein's office's website concerning allegations of Russian spies levied against the President of the United States. As a matter of fact, that's the date that they posted a list of who they had identified as being witnesses that were called to testify. That's the same day as this bill, just so you know. Now, not only that, this refers to a Defense Mentor Protege program. Well, there was already pre-existing under the Department of the Army a mentor program. The Army had a mentor program. And the Army had a mentor program prior not only to this bill, but also prior to the University of Chicago setting up a special program with the Department of the Army. It's very important in terms not only of timelines, but in potential implications of why they would need to take a program that already existed and put a bill with a completely different named reference on this day. But what's even more important is this one here. C, removal of pilot program references. And it says 1, in the subsection heading for subsection A by striking pilot, which is all caps, and 2, by striking pilot, all small letters, each place it appears. Unfortunately, nobody from any committee in Congress, up to and including the Senate Intelligence Committee, or anybody from any federal agency, up to and including the Department of Defense, responded at all to A, 9 reports from 2018, allegedly that were produced by the Department of the Air Force concerning their priorities for the upcoming period that were co-authored by people who, at least one person, who now is no longer in that position, but is in a guidance counselor position at a Texas university, as well as changes to the Army Reserve website that reclassified a variety of different MOSs under helicopter pilot. You mean like helicopter money? Now, striking the pilots is one thing, but it's very disingenuous if you decided you were going to ping off or knock off those black writers and you weren't going to say anything about what that means. By the way, the bill never got passed. Secondly, Congressional Defense Committees defined. This is very concerning to me because this happened to be passed prior to the meeting before the Small Business Committee of the Senate of the Army Futures Command, where they were discussing defense small businesses. What was the follow-up on this? None. It was referred to the House Committee on Armed Services. Why was there no follow-up on this? If this was a legitimate bill doing anything close to what it says or implies, why was there no follow-up after the Army Futures Command made its submission before the Senate Committee on Small Business in July of 2019? Okay, so the next one is H.R. 2762, to amend Title 10 United States Code to provide for the modification and clarification of construction authority in the event of a declaration of war or national emergency and for other purposes. It was proposed by sponsor Representative Ruben Gallego, introduced on May 15th, 2019, referred to the Committee on Armed Services, to the Committee on Armed Services, Subcommittee on Readiness on May 16th, 2019. So it was proposed the day before. It was introduced the day before. And then the next day, it was referred to committee. It's where it still is. It hasn't been passed. The things about this that are very noticeable are, A, has this been engaged? Why hasn't this been passed? Why hasn't this been passed? And why was it not passed prior to the declaration of a state of emergency in the United States? It puts in here a limitation on. It says here, the total cost of all military construction projects undertaken using that authority during the national emergency may not exceed $250 million. Well, I got to be honest with you, 250 or 25 is not a metric that I've seen as part of the specific kind of metrics flipping and or metric schemes that are part of the pattern of racketeering activity, specifically in regards to the Department of Defense. So that's very notable. But on the other hand, it says this, going down a little further. E, the military construction projects, including any military family housing and ancillary supporting facility projects, to be canceled or deferred in order to provide funds to undertake construction projects using the construction authority described in subsection A, and the possible impact of the cancellation or deferment of such military construction projects on military readiness and the quality of life of members of the armed forces and their dependents. I see. So you thought that it was important to do what in regards to military families when it came to analyzing readiness? This seems to go toward my allegations of using members of the military as a way to lean on and redistribute assets associated with the military. Let me ask you, how much money under COVID-19 has been redistributed or has been appropriated or has been obligated for response under civilian agencies, up to and including states that were supposed to have that money available in order to provide for what was determined to be an emergency response? Was any of it limited to $250 million? There's been a noticeable lack of demonstration, of acknowledgement of the severity of the crisis as it is by members of the actual military the entirety of 2019. Why? Did it have anything to do with what happened in November of 2019? See, in November of 2019, something did get passed. Remember? And not only that, but by March 15th of 2020, what happened? Well, what happened on March 16th of 2020 is many states, including the state of Texas, made a statement of a declaration of a state of emergency concerning COVID-19. But March 15th of 2020 was the one-year anniversary on the Office of the President's budget priorities for the Department of Defense. And it was in the continuing appropriations bill, or the emergency appropriations bill from November of 2019, that there was a preclusion put upon in terms of the priorities for that emergency appropriations process. Functional possibilities for military to be in a state of readiness in order to respond to a emergency situation on par with or comparable to what is actually going on with COVID-19. Not only that, but there were certain benchmarks that were coming due in 2019 that were connected to previous appropriations, including outlays that were up to 10 years, and would have made available under previous outlays, were they allowed to be engaged, a possibility for certain kinds of responses during this alleged emergency situation that were not engaged. And not only were they not engaged domestically within the United States concerning members of the United States military, but the specific benchmarks of concern, the specific hedges, ended up being executed once by private interests in China and once by the state in Russia. Those were meant to deliver on capital outlays associated with the United States military, specifically in connection with chemical and biological weapons. Why were they executed by Chinese interest and the state apparatus or the state functioning of Russia during a time frame when it should have been implemented here in the United States by members of the United States military? The next one is H.R. 2756, Developing the National Security Workforce Act, sponsored by Representative Anthony Brown. It was introduced on May 15, 2019. This is the ironic thing. It was introduced the same day as the last one. That one was referred to the Committee on Armed Services the next day. This one was referred to the Committee on Armed Services the same day. And that's where it stayed. It was not referred or was not put into a subcommittee assignment. So the last action was on the same day of introduction. One of the things this brings up is the same question I had with the last one, or the first one, which is a reference to this concept of apprenticeship. And it makes me concerned that these are actually precursors of what I saw this past summer regarding changes to the American standards the American Society for Non-Destructive Testing standards changes, specifically standards regarding qualifications of personnel that are licensed to work at or in regards to training facilities regarding non-destructive testing. They changed the standards this past summer, and they're unacceptable. Part of what they've done, I believe, is, as an example, allow for the functionality of the illicit crypto commercial enterprises that are anticipating that they're going to be able to get financing based on changes at the Federal Reserve, including that were illustrated through public comment periods that were speaking to policy changes that were ongoing since late summer throughout the fall. And I attempted to publish a public comment on that specific convertible virtual currency public comment period, because public comments are all that I've been remanded to, and they refused to publish my public comment. Not only did they do that, but they specifically sabotaged in terms of which public comments they allowed to be published during the day when the Supreme Court of the United States was deciding on its case concerning the Affordable Care Act. And they also changed the numbers and the kinds of public comments that were allowed to be made available during the entire time frame following that announcement, when there was illegal hedging going on in consideration of proxy scenarios being worked out in the United States specific to the nation of Iran, and having to do with a piece of legislation that was proposed by a member of the Senate that I understood at the time was engaged in processes of attempting to either entice, extort, or otherwise make available illicit redistribution of military assets based upon a pretense of supporting military veterans in name only. So when I see what's going on with this one, that again is part of a similar modality, then the question becomes a couple of things that come up with this concept of a qualified training program for developing the national security workforce, to direct the Secretary of Defense to develop workforce development and investment incentives, and to consider a qualified training program of an offerer as part of the past performance rating of such offerer and for other purposes. Well, upon what are you supposed to base past performance? This gets into something that came up this past summer, which was the 40th anniversary of an audit that had been prepared by the Office of Comptroller of Currency regarding allegations that had been levied in connection with a senatorial request for an audit of the Department of Energy when it came to its uranium enrichment facilities that to this day has not been responded to. And not only that, but that was itself a precursor to changes within the Department of Energy regarding performance incentives and performance standards. You still haven't dealt with that in the Department of Energy, and you want to try to put that on the Department of Defense. And we're also talking about this from the concept or the consideration of small businesses, which again gets into who did what in consideration of the completely unacceptable report provided by the Army Futures Command to the Committee on Small Business in July of 2019. Again, this wasn't passed. It hasn't been voted down, and it hasn't been taken out of committee either. Now, if we're talking about time management, I am 19 minutes and 16 seconds in. I could stop at under 20 with 3. I have at least 10 more that I have not considered. But if I had to do a spot check and an audit comparable to what I would have done when I worked at the Department of Public Health in San Francisco, this would be enough.